the word in thinking. And I got a new book I'm working on called Walking the Unnamed Path, Enthinking Forward. So what I want to do is show you a little bit about the book and try a couple of processes out today, if that's good for you all. And so let's do that. The book, Enthinking Forward, Walking the Unnamed Path, just started it today. Let me make that a little bigger for you. And I've got the chapters, and what I'm doing is putting some of my own stories in and then working on one particular koan at a time. And these are stories I've written myself, by the way. And it is the sequel book to Growth OD, but has a different focus on it, of kind of a popular book, you know, you get in airports or something. So it builds on in thinking work we've talked about. Lou Pondy was using the word enthinkment. Martin Heidegger uses in thinking. And I started to work out the pillars of Growth OD and how each of them has a different kind of thinking involved. So that's what I'm doing with the book. Relied on Elior to write some poems for because I love how he writes poems. So that's in the book. And I have stories like about my grandparents. My grandfather made stained glass windows, for example. So it's one of the chapters. I was thinking of taking a koan each time. Like my mentor, Lou Pondy, had us work with what's the sound of one hand clapping? And it's an exercise in non-rational thinking. And it's a different way of thinking, and I call it thinking with love, or in thinking forward about the future. And it requires a non-linear kind of thinking. That's why Lou Pondy would have me do the exercises. And I remember in class people would go, what do you mean the sound of one hand thinking? And we're all trying to do it with our linear cognitive mindset and thinking, okay, I'm going like this. Can I hear it? Can I hear that? Can I hear one hand? And you know, of course, that's not the answer at all. The answer is to reflect on, what it is to meditate on that in the world that we're in, and our relationship to the world and to sound, and to really reflect on it, and then journal, and then come up with an idea. So it's an art form in Buddhism to do that kind of nonlinear thinking. And so Lou Pondy taught me that in our program, as PhD students. And then when I met Grace Ann and started working with Jainism, I encountered the Jain versions of koans. And they don't have a nice word like Zen. I mean, you read Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, so it's kind of like Persig's book, and learning to think about how maintaining the motorcycle is maintaining your own soul and your own relationship to your son who is riding with them on the motorcycle. And all these relational fabrics are there. So Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, the first half of the book, is just the father and son going on a motorcycle trip. And to maintain the motorcycle, the father has to know the system of the ignition, the system of starting the motorcycle, the system of the fuel tank and the carburation, and the balancing of all those systems. So he's talking about that maintenance, but that's not the point. The point of the book is he's maintaining a relation with his son, because evidently the family is going through some trouble, and the father and son are on a road trip. So he gets to know the son better, and he's dealing with the son's reaction and anger and, what a kid will do. And so that maintenance of the relationship is the point. And the second half of the book is about values. And since we just did Boje, the second half of the book is going into a very Greek mode of value orientation that I won't go into. And in fact, most people don't do much with the second half of the book. I remember Lou Pondy crying, and I remember crying myself in a university seminar. And he's crying, I'm crying. Other people in the class are looking at the two of us like, why are they crying? It's a book. It's like, and Lou had written a working paper that became published and is quite widely known on the sound of one hand clapping and leadership, etc. So he really delved into it. So I don't know if that helps explain what a KOAN is, a cone. Ken, do you pronounce it the same way I am? Because often I have these words and I don't know how to pronounce them. Ken's staying in the dark. He's not going to help me.
Ken's trying to talk.
Oh,
we can't hear him.
Oh, okay. Ken, you might put that other microphone on. This one's not, you're not audible. Yeah.
Microphone check.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Koan is, that's correct. The idea is that in Zen, there is a direct experience of life which transcends, is more complete than our rational understanding of the world. Rational understanding creates a model of the world, lives in the model, and avoids the direct experience or the enthinkment mode. So the Zen master gives an unsolvable problem to the student to break their mind, to exhaust all of their rational faculties. And then when they give up in despair, having seen the failure of rationality to understand it, he hits them over the head with a stick and then says, now you understand. And so it's the difference between living in your head and living in the world. And the koan is simply a non-rational, unsolvable problem, like a divide by zero, that exhausts your rational mind by trying to just think through it instead of trying to live through it or know through it. Oh.
Beautiful explanation. I pretty appreciate it. And I hope you can see when we've talked about Martin Heidegger's work being in the world with Sabine and myself, and then the book on mindfulness, that is a kind of mindfulness that's not about rational calculation. It's a whole different orientation to being mindful in the world we're in. And I like the idea of breaking the thinking. I've referred to it as learning to unthink the way you think, so you can think differently is in thinking. And then another way that I'm talking about is thinking with the heart, because I think Lou was thinking with his heart and was using Zen to get us to think with our heart. And we were so deep in a rational cognitive mindset that we couldn't get it that easily, you know what I mean? And some of his students never got it. Never, you know what I'm saying? And so that's kind of what it's about. This is a labor of love to start a new book, and so let's see if I can find where I wrote a story here. I'm trying to find it. Okay. So let me give you a story of my grandmother and some of her wisdom. Her name was Wilda, and I actually did a special issue of Journal of Management, Spirituality, and Religion on Wilda, and some of my recollections of my grandmother. And because she has a very interesting history. It's spelled Wilda, Wilda, but I used to call her Wild A because the woman was wild. She was a trick rider in the rodeo that used to come through Washington State and Goldendale. She crossed the Oregon Trail in a covered wagon, and when during that passage, her little brother, who was an infant, died. She had a brother more her age and herself who walked behind the wagon from Kansas most of the time. I hope they got to ride some of the time to Washington State and wound up in Goldendale. They'd been farmers in Kansas, but not doing that well. They tried farming in Washington State and failed. The family failed at it. And so they moved into the city and opened a livery stable. And so my great-grandfather, he knew how to be a blacksmith. And I may have told you before, when I was 53, my mother divulged all of these stories to me in one shot with a shoebox full of some photos of my grandmother in the rodeo, and proceeded to rip the photo in half and said how much she hated it. And I asked her, well, why do you hate your grandmother was a rodeo rider? I said, that's a fantastic heritage. And she says, women didn't do that kind of thing in those days. And it was embarrassing. And I go like, what are you talking about, embarrassing? She says, well, we lived in a place in the wilderness with a dirt floor in the cabin. And that's embarrassing. And if you think, I was writing about it today, and I was thinking about my mother, that she was growing up getting older in the 50s and 60s, right? She'd met my dad. And my dad actually married her when she was pregnant with twins. And the twins died, and I'm the second or third born, right? And she wanted to live in the suburbs. Meanwhile, there's my dad. You want to know why they divorced? Because he built a house on the farm of his dad and mother on the Little Spokane River, where the cows were and the goats and the chickens and the apple orchard and the beehives. And my mother hated it. She said, I'm not living there. I want a brick house. I want a cherry tree. I want to be in the suburbs in the city of Spokane. I don't want to live on a farm. I don't want anything to do with that anymore. And I never understood that until late in life, how they got married and were from two different worlds. You know what I'm saying? And that this was never going to work. You know, that you can't take somebody in the farm life and a spouse in the city life and put that together. The more secrets tumbled out, but a little bit about this. So Wilda steps inside. I wrote snow layers, her coat. Her daughter clusters in a half-lit stove, teeth shattering. Her second husband, Percy, lies sick in the back room, fever frosting his cheeks. So her first husband was a bootlegger, Wilda. And why was she a bootlegger? Because it was the Great Depression and they had no money and there was no jobs. So he got moonshine, would take a freight train from on the coastline of Washington State and go down to Canada. No, not go down to California, right? And somewhere above San Francisco would sell the hooch and then take a ride back to get some more up in Goldendale, Washington. Now this did not work out well for Wilda and my mother, because he was gone for a month or 2 months at a time, and they had no food. So Wilda would throw a rock and bring down a squirrel. She knew the names of plants, and she would make dandelion salads. Not the flower, but the leaves. And so she could live off the land and she could fish at the lake when the ice wasn't packed over. And she could build a fire, make firewood, fires in the house. So this was very tough living for my mother. My mother was also knew Wilda's brother, Gerald, had married a Native American. My mother told me this for the first time. He married a Native American, and the sheriff and deputy beat him to death, and he died. They claimed he was town drunk or whatever. My heritage says no, he was just married to a Native American. At that time, the prejudice was so big in the United States and lasted for several decades longer. You didn't do that. And my mother was telling me about how that she was there in the wilderness with Stella LeClaire, the name of the Native American woman, and the papoose. And I had a picture of that. And she was also about to rip it up, and I grabbed it from her and said, no, I would like to have that if I could, you know. And so the pain the woman was feeling was coming through. So I'm trying to write some of the story. Just kind of outlined it a bit. And the sound of the one hand clapping would be many ways to interpret that in this story. But if you think about that, Gerald had died, Stella LeClaire is there with her infant. They're living in the same wooden shack with a dirt floor, waiting for Raymond. The name of my son, by the way, is Raymond. I named him after his grandfather. Waiting for Raymond to return with some money, buy something from the store, bring some provisions to the family, and then leave again. So the sound of one hand clapping could be many interpretations. I'm going to ask you about it, but it's there's an inward poise and gratitude that Wilda displayed. Wilda was the most sane person in my family tree. Okay. And I got a lot of crazy wackos in my family tree. Okay. There's a guy named Henry Boje that, on my dad's side, that was, came from Europe, either Denmark or possibly Germany, but hid the German heritage, you know. And he was a kind of a bum, but he did marry people, and there were children, etc. So there's this sound of one hand clapping between, for me, for me, it's a hand of gratitude, and it's clapping on its own. But my mother's not in a hand of gratitude. She's in the hand of like embarrassment, deprivation, hiding her ancestry, not willing to admit. If she's telling me this at 53, that there's Native Americans married into the family, she's not clapping with the hand of gratitude, okay? She also told me on my dad's side, my uncle had married into a Native American family in Puyallup Reservation on the coast of Washington, and the prejudice was so bad they had to live on a reservation, had children, and at that time reservations were being merged on the coast because property values were up. And then they had moved them to a reservation in in Idaho, and then to Wyoming. And I did a record search in Wyoming. There's actually Sam Boje, I think it's Edna Boje, and several other Bojes that grew up and died on that reservation that I never knew about, you know. So I hope that gives you some idea into one hand clapping, and I wanted to ask if each of you would want to meditate a little bit on your own story, not on my story, but hopefully mine gives you an opening to one hand clapping, or you just want to talk immediately, or you want to journal a little bit. This might end up being a book that has pages to write in it, but I'm not sure yet. Does that sound like an opening? And okay, so
I would like a little time to think about it and process.
okay, so what I'll do, if that's okay with everybody, Olivia said I saw a couple of people nod. Then
Yeah, same here.
what I would do is, if you got a paper and a piece of pen, a pen or a pencil or something, why don't we just breathe for a little bit, for a minute or two, and you have to breathe anyway. so breathe. Would that be okay? And then stop the breathing part, and then write what comes into your mind, and what incidents from your own life register for you. So, and we'll try it and see how you do.
Can you give us a time frame?
Sure. How about 2 minutes of breathing and 5 minutes of writing? Is that good?
Okay, it's now 1:38.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to lead some breathing exercises. So, and I've been wanting to get back to breathing anyway with you all. So we'll do the 4-part breath, 4 counts. It's 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 count exhale, 4 count hold, and then it repeats the cycle. And I'll talk to you how that works. So we'll start with an inhale, count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 1, 2. Exhale 4. Hold. And then inhale. So this is a very gentle breath cycle. So let's do it again. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale 4. Hold 4. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. And I'll just let you do the rhythm on your own. Okay, so that's about 2 minutes of breathing. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you need to continue, go ahead. But at this time, take a notebook, a piece of paper, and a pen, and write down any reflections that come right now. Let me get. So we've had about 5 minutes. I don't know. I'm a person that likes to write, so if you need more time, it's good. If you've had enough time, that's good. So just taking. Yeah, I think what I'd like to do. Okay, so we're going to do breakout rooms in pairs. So you have time to talk to each other. And I'm going to go in the breakout room with Olivia. So please wait there, Olivia, until I get there. And Paul may or may not be in that room. He's evidently back online. Hopefully he has some voice things now. So I'll open the room. All you have to do is press the button. Finding the button, Sabine, you might have to call David. So I'll stay here with you, Sabine. And Joy, you can go in with Tom in room 1. Did you find your button, Joy? Okay. Hi, Olivia.
Hi there.
Are being recorded. Oh,
Okay.
does it bother you?
No.
Okay. Oh, let me put this side-by-side view. There we go. Okay, so I'll listen to your story.
Well, so I love being invited to write without thinking. I think I shared recently, that's where my 5 levels of self-awareness came through. The first thing I thought of was a question. Where are we formed? I was just listening to what you shared and how I can see aspects of that rebel and that love of horses from your grandmother. And just as a reflection on that, the man that taught me how to ride, he wanted me to learn trick roping or trick riding, and he even had a fancy saddle, but we never got to that. But I did learn how to spin a rope. I think I told you that. Anyway, so I wrote, where are we formed? And then my grandmother, who I called Nana, was a saint, and she was really smart and kind and generous. And when her son died, my father, when I was 5, she was really strong, and I spent a lot of time with her. But that abandonment left me not very confident. And she taught me games, and she always let me win, I think, because she knew I lacked this confidence. So I've always loved playing games. Now my own granddaughter is struggling. So it's my son's daughter. They live in Utah, so I don't see them much. Where when I was young, my grandmother was about 15 minutes away. So I kind of am sad that I don't see my grandkids as much. But it just is the way it is. And I don't want to live in Utah. Okay. So my granddaughter is 14, and I don't talk to her that much, but when I do, it's always great. But I saw her about a year ago. I text her, but we've never talked. But yesterday, actually, Saturday night, she texted me because she was concerned about my son, who I think had to have some beers or something. So anyway, so she was worried, and I talked to him and I talked to her, and she was fine. But then last night she texted me and said she wanted to talk to me today. So I'm going to call her after this meeting, after our get together today. And I just feel so blessed that she sees me as a confidant, and I hope I can be that strong person to her and rock that, kind and wise, and help her.
Because I lived in Chicago,
And be that wonderful grandmother that I had. And so, and then I had this other question about Pondy and the way he gets us to think, could this be a way to break out of the matrix? Really, because that's kind of what we're in when we're so programmed. And so I've had some exploration in that area, as you know, and there's been a way of kind of following what's going on through questions that have been, it's going on for 8 years on these boards. And so, and a lot of them just get you to think. So anyway, that's kind of what I came through for me.
For whatever reason.
Well, can you mute because Tom's coming through on the thing and all. You okay? Okay, thank you, Olivia. Just some notes I put down and come back to some things you said. So clapping, my ancestors and me trying to clap, and I've got one hand and they've got another hand. And then there's the clap of me and Native Americans, and the clapping isn't happening in this time space. Then there's the notion that I'm clapping with Stella LeClaire from that time period in the 1930s and 40s, back in there, and clapping with her daughter Georgie in the Papoose, and I'm in a different time place than they are, and even clapping with my mother and understanding her misery, and clapping with Wilda, who's always in gratitude. She's just always happy and good. She was that grandmother that would offer me a cigarette. Or what kind of grandmother does that? Have a cupcake and a cigarette. So, but she was always like accepting and welcoming, and my mother was always like mad and angry and hurt. And so I'm clapping in my time here in 2025, and these people in the Great Depression, I'm clapping with them, but our hands aren't meeting, so and there's some kind of fulfillment there of how much one hand clapping was going on in that time period and this time period, and that I have some sort of responsibility to hear the one hand clapping, even if it's not in my time zone, not in my time and space. And there's something about a time of rejection and prejudice and injustice, and that a hand of love or gratitude can clap with that in a good way, in a healing kind of way, I think. There's an understanding of Ray Eaton, her father, and my mother, that relationship, and then how it got way worse with her stepdad. And there were times when she's taken to the shed and things happening to women that shouldn't happen. And the whole sibling rivalry with her stepdad's blood daughter and how she was treated. So a sibling rivalry grows up between my mother, Lorraine, and her stepsister, Val, that took up their whole life space. Like, they actually bought mobile homes next to each other, even though the sibling rivalry raged the whole time of her whole life. Anyway, so those are some of the things that surfaced in one hand clapping. So I hope that wasn't too much sharing.
Oh, that was beautiful. Do you want to have Paul speak? Is he able to? Paul is here. You're on mute, David. David, you're on mute.
Oh, so Paul's saying he can type. The microphone's not working for him, nor video. He's being utterly flabbergasted about what, Paul? You can type it in. But it was, so he heard both of us. But I'm sure we will get an email from Paul. Oh, he says the stories I have just now heard from you two are simply overwhelming. Is it overwhelming in a good way, or is it overwhelming in like, I wish I would never have heard these things? Maybe you can type that, Paul, as I want to be respectful of you. The stories from you two in a good way, because, and then he's saying he's going to type something else. So thanks, Paul, for typing, and we miss your beautiful face. So he's saying he's hearing stories of him, which I think he means they're relating to him, and then that's flabbergasting and overwhelming. So I think I'll put a note out to the people in the breakout rooms. Maybe we should come back and talk. Let's see. Podcast. Come back together. So I'm just telling them we come back together in 2 minutes. So, so what do you think? Yeah, and Paul's saying that it exists another space-time. So that's what I was getting from my quantum work, that we're in space-time mattering, yes, but we're also linked to 100 years ago or 50 years ago of space-time mattering, and the hands can clap across those generations. So it's like an intergenerational clapping. How about that? that we're doing.
Suddenly their daughter or son was.
That makes sense.
And it's bigger than the 2 or 3. Yeah, I took it as a personal thing to learn to ride horses with Grace Ann. That's taken 30 years, you know, and then also to get to know nature in a deeper level. That's why when people say sustainability, I have a whole other characterization of it than most people do about recycling. To me, it's like being one in nature. It's being, you know, that contemplative time in nature, and respecting other species, and interspecies communication with horses, but with trees and plants and that sort of thing. Just all that stuff is coming up.
There was an Instagram I saw the other day. I'll see if I can find it and figure out how to send it, but I don't know if it's real, but it's these 2 women showing how they were next to a tree branch, and they asked the tree branch to get closer, and they just kept coaxing it, and suddenly the tree branch moved over. I don't know if it was natural, but I'm so curious to try it, because I think they do hear us. I remember a astronaut speaking at a church I was going to, or it was Science of Mind, and he said they were doing aura photography on plants and seeing how they would react, say, to watering them. And they said the plant's aura expanded when you even thought about watering them.
Yeah.
So I think now, if I think to water a plant, I better do it, because the plant knows I thought of it.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. Yeah, we're going to go back to the main room in seconds, but let's see, Paul has written, what a way to put it together, I guess. I don't know how to process this. this is so much going on. But that's the whole thing about, and he calls fractals in the name of a fractal author. And it is fractal in the way that it's interconnecting across space-time. And that's a nice way to think of it, Paul.
I think it's inviting us.
Okay, so Olivia and I and Paul got to talk. Paul is chatting, and I'll continue to monitor the chat, or you can do that and see what he's saying. And do you all want to talk about it? what that was like, or what you came up with, what insights, and then maybe Olivia and I can share. Who would like to go first?
I told a story about my grandmother being part of a scandal in our small town. But Tom and I both kind of identified with it, that it really wasn't much of a scandal. And it was because it was a small town and people had their ideas of who you were supposed to be and who you were not supposed to be and who you were supposed to be with and those kind of things. So I told a rather detailed, because I wrote the whole time, story about my grandmother's scandal. And fortunately, she remarried a man that was very well respected in our town. And that brought her up in her, elevation of being a worthy, woman in our town. And Tom said he could identify with that, from stories in his family. So I don't know if you want to tell any of yours, Tom, but we both encountered stories like that in our family.
Can I just reflect that Tom and I love old movies, and half of the movies have a theme like that, like the black and white movies, and it's all about that. A lot of them, it's really fascinating. So thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could relate to it because I was part of a scandal in my family, and that was I managed to be the first person ever divorced in the history of the family. So I carry that badge of honor to this day. And I told Joy that I don't think, and I think I told Liz, or I think it was well over a year before my parents told any of my aunts or uncles or cousins or anyone, because I lived in Chicago. They were up in northern Wisconsin, and I married this woman from Chicago. And that was going to head nowhere, and that's what ultimately they thought had happened. So it was interesting.
So Ken and Sabine, do you want to share a little bit before?
Yeah, Sabine, why don't you go ahead?
Ken, would you? I mean, please. I think you're better at this than I am.
We were all over the map. I had been dreaming about the relationship of one hand clapping to one person trying to tell a true story to no one. You need the true listener for true storytelling to actually occur. Each of you has a story to tell. Each of you is not going to judge the other. And yet somewhere in between those two stories, or in that space, we do gain some knowledge, but it's not through individual analysis of our own story, but something else comes to us as a result of us presenting true stories to each other. My phenomenon of experience. So we ended up going off on tangents kind of like that, about trying to sense making and truth telling.
Yeah, and I think too, that how, what came to my mind was, when do we become dissatisfied? When do we become embarrassed, right? I mean, this is all a matter of comparison, when we compare ourselves with others. And I shared a story of, the story of growing up in a small apartment, until I knew that not everybody lived that way. It was fine, and then I thought, oh my God, it was nothing like what David said, living on a dirt floor. I mean, how relative everything is, and how we reflect in what we experience and see, in other people, I mean, the small apartment that I grew up in, might have seemed like a palace to David's grandmother, and I mean, how relative this all is, and how we live. And Heidegger said too, he called it Abständigkeit, how we like compare. We're just wired to compare ourselves. And, where do we stand and all of that? But it's so relative, right? And I think it's easy to fall into non-gratitude when we make, comparisons, I mean, the lack of knowledge. I was quite happy in that small apartment. It wasn't a dirt floor. It was comfortable. I felt safe. I felt loved. I mean, really, what more did I need? Right? And then it's like, oh my God, other people have, these huge houses and several bathrooms. And it's like, what? That's like, I mean, then you start to question all of this, and kind of moving you into a realm of non-gratitude, which, and that's a dangerous slope. Oh.
Thank you, Sabine and Ken. Olivia, do you want to share some of what you came up with, or?
Yeah. It's interesting too. I was just reflecting on joy and how we do, like you were saying, Sabine, we don't know what's different, but in a small town, if you're rejected, it's almost like you might fear death, because if your community keeps you safe. Anyway, I just thought of that. But when I was thinking of the one hand clapping and going back, I also went back into my ancestry, and I thought about my father's mother, who we called Nana, and she was really a wonderful support for me, especially because my father died when I was 5. And so she was going through the grief of losing her son, and we were all dealing with the grief of losing our father. She was so smart and strong, and she traveled a lot by herself, even though she was married. I don't think they were happily married, my grandmother and grandfather, but she just was a really kind and generous, and I was not confident, so she taught me how to play games. I think she let me win a lot because she could see. And so now my granddaughter's reaching out to me. I'm going to be calling her. She's 14, and she texted me last night and wants to talk to me, and I just feel so blessed that she trusts me, and I hope I can be that strong grandmother as well. And so maybe that's the other hand clapping with me. Yeah, so that was kind of my insight, and I'm Nana to her, so that's fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a parallel there with Wilda and me, Wild A, because that was the one grandmother I could go to. My other grandmother had had a stroke, and I'll talk about her maybe in the next episode, but she was on the farm, and she stayed on the farm with my grandfather on my dad's side most of her life. But she had a really good early story that I'll save for next time. But Wilda was, this rebel character, which I am, and she's going out and joining the rodeo when it comes through town, and going on the circuit with them, and trick riding, running along the horse and jumping in the saddle, standing up in the saddle, all of those kinds of wild things that happen in rodeos. I used to love going to rodeos. And her brother was doing the same thing, and her dad had the blacksmith shop and the livery stable, and her mother was, a very loving person. And so you had that, and then for some reason, Wilda takes off and marries Raymond Eaton, who's a sheep herder and a silver and gold prospector in Idaho. And then during the Depression, he asked to be a bootlegger. And I remember, we should probably do an episode just on Raymond, but I remember he had one eye, you know, and an eye got put out in an explosion in a mine. And he had a glass eye. And he would come once a year and visit us, my mom and my brothers and my sister and I in Spokane. He would come over from Idaho, where he was still chasing the gold and silver, still living with the sheep, didn't have much contact with people except when he bought food or something. And he was like my age now, I remember, and having bar fights over his girlfriend. You know, like I'm 77, so if you imagine him at about 77 going into a bar and having a fight, like I would never do that, you know, because, well, I'd likely get beat up, you know, for one thing, and I'm trying to be a Himsa, nonviolent, for another thing. But he was a tough guy. I remember my dad and I went there, and Raymond took off and climbed a mountain next to where he was mining and sheep herding. And my dad tried to keep up with him. My dad was a football player. My dad was an outdoor guy. And he couldn't keep up with this 77-year-old man trying to climb a mountain, you know. And I was just a little kid, and I was wondering about this whole thing. But my mother, you know, I made some points in my writing that I want to speak to, that when I'm clapping, and it's the one hand clapping, the other hand is a generation or two generations ago. It's with the prejudice and hatred of the time. It's with the gratitude of Wilda, who loved the outdoors, loved being married to a bootlegger, then married herself, a Native American man who grew up in a missionary school for a few years. Her mother, his mother, Percy's mother, had two children, couldn't afford to keep them both. So Percy got the short straw, and she threw him in a missionary school. Now, I think she was white, and I think he was Native American. The person she had the affair with was Native American, and twins were born. Now, the other twin she passed off as white, and herself, and moved to California. He became a big executive in one of the big oil companies that was in California, like super rich, you know, limos, cars, big estates. So you have this tale of the two brothers, one put into the missionary school. That's where they cut your hair. You're not allowed to speak your own language. You're not allowed to have your own indigenous ways, no spiritual practices, and you would get beat severely if you violated any of those rules. So about third grade, he jumped out the window and ran. And so Percy was a mad person his whole life. Now imagine my mother getting this, going from Raymond with the dirt floor to Percy, who was enraged his whole life. So he had a shed in the backyard. Now, why Wilda put up with it, I don't know, but my mother went to that shed a lot, and it wasn't just for being beaten. And things happened in the shed she would never talk about. But you knew the times, and if you know the history, you know what happened in that shed. And you know that the daughter of Percy, blood daughter, named Val, and my mother had a sibling rivalry their whole life. I mean, it was, you could cut the air in there, the energy of hatred and grief and distrust was there. And if you talk to my mother, oh, this Val is doing this now. This Val got a Rottweiler. This Val has an older son. He weighs about 300 pounds. He carries a machete, and he beat through my door with a machete. And I'm going like, Jesus, why would you live next door to all of that? Why would you continue to live that? Oh, I like this place. I'm staying here. I'm going, all you do is watch the Home Shopping Center all day, the Home Shopping Channel. I'm going, Mom, leave, move, get a life. But she wouldn't. Never got over divorcing, my dad divorcing and leaving her, which, as I shared before, was pretty predictable. If you take the farming son who becomes an entrepreneur, wants to live on the property with his dad and mom, she wants to be downtown to live the life of shopping channels and brick house with a cherry tree, and we did have a cherry tree. It's just one hand clapping my whole life. Does that make sense? But if I hold Wilda there, the woman of gratitude, the person who would always accept you, always had a cupcake and a cigarette to hand you. I mean, they were a smoking generation. But and you could do no wrong in her eyes. You know what I mean? So that's sort of what I got out is quantum-wise, one hand clapping to another hand in a different era, a different epoch. And what is the sound of that? What is the ethics of that? What's the value? That's what I get. I was like, that's just from the journal writing today. I'm going like, and I don't have anything in that book I sent you. It's just an outline. And now I have to go back from today and write the stories the way they came out in this session. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'd like to do next week. And I wondered if you all were interested in having another ancestor tale. So
I really enjoyed it. And I just want to reflect that I feel like you have a lot of the characteristics of Wilda, that you live this, kind of rebelliously, but you also, it feels like I can do no wrong in your eyes. And I think probably other people have experienced that too. I just think it's beautiful.
Yeah, you all can do no wrong. You're my favorite people other than Gracianne. This is beautiful.
I think it's amazing, how I think your grandmother sounds like just like somebody that would have been awesome to know. It's just absolutely incredible, the fearlessness of it. It's like, okay, like standing on the back of a horse, and it's like, I think this is so amazing and cool.
Yeah, and Percy, the stepfather, he was a curmudgeon, but she had a horse, he had a horse, and they were forest rangers together, just riding all around there's a lot of forests up there in Washington, and a lot of trees and lakes, and they had a cabin out there, and they loved it. They just loved that life. So yeah, he had his weak points. Yeah, I can't really forgive that, but he also was a man of the outdoors and maybe getting in touch with his own native identity in that way. You know what I'm saying? That was ripped away from him. So there's this whole, when my mother opened that shoebox, it just let out like Pandora's box, all this stuff flowing out of it at age 53. I'm 70.
Do you have any photos of Wilda?
I do, and I have. I'll try to bring some next time, but I have that one that she ripped up with my Wilda on the horse in trick riding, and I have one of the Stella Leclerc and the Papoose daughter, Georgie, or Georgia was her name, and I just find it amazing to do the storytelling this way. So Tom, what do you think? Did Wilda have gratitude? What do you think?
I think so. If I got the characters right, you said she did, right?
I always found her happy, smiling.
Well, there's a sign right there.
Having something baked, ready to hear what's going on with you. Taking time for her grandchildren, just all of those things were my other grandmother, they had cows to milk, they had geese to feed, they had a farm to keep up, and yeah, you could have a family photo once a year, you could have some pancakes. But I remember being a teenager and going to that farm after my dad had left and taking a bus to get out there, and I could go out there, but and I could get $5 for the day from them. And for $5, I put in post holes, I picked up stones, I cleaned up barns, and then when they didn't want to pay me $5, they would drive me to a neighbor's and have me work a day for the neighbor. So it was very transactional, you know what I'm saying? It was more like I was an obligation, not somebody like, hi David, how are you doing? It was more like, hey David, grab the post hole digger over there and go to work, you know? It was,
That's the way I grew up.
and my
That's
dad grew up
hard
that way
work.
too. My dad grew up that way too on a farm, where it's not this idyllic life on a farm that you hear about. It's they're up at 4 a.m. They got to go milk the cows, and then 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, they're like in the orchards, they're feeding the geese, and then the man August, my grandfather, he goes to work making stained glass windows for the Pittsburgh Plate and Glass Company, because you can't support a farm, you know, a small farm. You love it, but you can't support it without a job, you know. So that transition, just, I think it broke my dad's heart when he couldn't be on the farm, you know. I think it did. Yeah. I remember he built a house. Who does that? Builds their own house, builds a basement, then moves the house onto the basement next to my grandfather's house. And then a year later, my mother refused to move into it. I guess she was into it for a few months when I was maybe 2 years old, and then maybe 3, so maybe less than a year, and then off to the suburbs. I hate the suburbs. I can't stand the suburbs. You know what I mean? I mean, all that you are in the suburbs, you love it, that's fine. I got to have some wilderness next to me. I got to be able to go and walk. I grew up in that. I don't know. I don't mean this to be about my stories. I was hoping you get an idea of one hand clapping in a deeper way than trying to figure it out rationally. You know, that's what I was hoping for today. Anyway, so next week, if you're amenable, I'll open up with my grandmother, Catherine, and she, as I said, got a stroke. So the time I knew her, she always had this stroke. So she was like paralyzed on one side mostly. It gained a lot of weight, and it was hard for her to speak because she had to relearn to talk and everything. But the story I'm going to focus on, I think, is when she was a young girl and her mother died. And I believe they came down from Canada to live in Washington. And her dad was a ne'er-do-well who just kind of took off and got drunk and was never heard from. But what happened to the daughter and her siblings, at that time, there weren't orphanages. Okay, so the daughters and the brothers, her brothers and sisters, put it that way, they got divided up into different families in the community. So my grandmother wound up in a mortuary family, and she had to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it was mainly potatoes. So during the time I met her, she would never have a potato dish in her house. She would never do potatoes because all she did was peel potatoes for that family. Now, to get out of that family, because it's kind of a slavery serfdom thing, you know, like the family will take you in, but you're a slave to that family. If they have a farm, you're a farm worker. If you have a mortuary, you're a mortuary worker, and you do childcare. So she made a deal during a plague, and I haven't got all the stats on the exact plague it was, but the thousands of people were dying in that county, and many of them coming to that mortuary family. So she made a deal as someone about the age of 13, I think, right around that age. that she would do all the bodies in the basement. In other words, she would drain the blood, drain the fluid, put the makeup on, stitch up the wound, stitch them up, whatever, put some makeup on them, make them look good for the family, do all that thing of embalming and stuff that I don't know what they do. I'm not sure I want to know. But she did that. So imagine the smell, the dead bodies piled up in the basement, taking them one by one, preparing them. So that was her path to freedom. Who does that to a child at 13, 14 years old, where she worked during that plague? Let's see. Did she work a summer? No. She probably worked 3 years to get out of there. So by the time she's midway through high school, or should have been going to school and probably wasn't, she got her freedom. You know what I'm saying? And so I got a koan to go with that. And I think you could use all kinds of koans for that one. But so that, what bravery, what heroism, what you talk about. Like I see these movies about so-called heroes that fire machine guns or something. I'm going like, you should have met my grandmother. That was a hero, you know? You know? But I didn't know her during that time. I knew her after she couldn't speak anymore, after she could bake and do the jams and jelly and put them in the rock cellar and, you know what I mean? Feed the geese. I think that's probably enough for today. So are you game for next week? Is that cool? Or you want to do something else?
Sure.
No, that's cool, David. And, that gives me, I think, an extra week, the following week for going into the Heidegger.
Yeah, go into Heidegger, and I hope we can have fun with it. And I'll come back another time and do more in this series. And
no, David, I mean, I think, you go next week, and that gives me, and then you can schedule me for the following week.
that'll be fine. Yeah.
Let's do that, and I will write that into my calendar. That way we can go into the mindfulness, and you can continue. Why break it up? That's my feeling, and I need extra time anyway, so that works out.
Okay. And so I'm grateful for you all today to put up with me, and thank you for being here. So I'll pass it on to Joy.
Well, it was really great today. I enjoyed hearing the stories and sharing the stories and learning more about koan, and thought you were talking about a cairn, like a stack of rocks when we first started. So I learned something today, how to pronounce koan. And I have had to miss a couple of our Tuesdays because of another obligation. So if I'm able to, I'll be here next week. And I did like the format of this type of storytelling, but I do have another obligation. So I may be here or I may not. I'll be here in spirit, and I will watch it on YouTube because I'm one of those likes. Every time I'm one of those likes out there. So thank you for doing that for us too.
You can pick somebody, Joy.
All right, let's hear from Tom.
Thank you, Joy. I am just grateful, David. This was such an interesting thing today, not what I expected, and I'm grateful for everyone sharing and Joy telling me some things, and just it's a wonderful day. So thank you all. We'll see you next week. I will give it to Ken.
I'm grateful for seeing my friends and get to think about true story telling, meeting Zen koans somewhere in the sense-making space. I thought of some things that I'd never thought of before. That's a pretty good day at work. Olivia, did you go?
I did not. So thanks. Yeah, this was really fun. I loved hearing, thinking of talking about history as a koan. This has really opened my mind. And I love stories about strong women, especially back when it really was, I think, less safe. But boy, those would be the women I'd want to be hanging out with. And I almost learned to trick ride when I was in high school. This guy that was teaching me, he taught me how to spin a rope, so I can do that. But we never got around to the trick riding because I wanted to do the other, jumping, all that. Anyway, so I would have loved to have met probably all your relatives, and I'm happy to do this next week.
I'm really grateful for the stories you all shared. Paul's writing, he's on board, storytelling, spinning forward, outward, inward, simultaneously, he writes. And he will write much more because I know Paul will send us all his thoughts. Thank you. This has been a wonderful experience for me, and it'll help me get on with the new book,